All right, so we're going to be talking about child abuse this week. So we only, after this is my last real lecture. After this, we'll have 2 weeks of review and then we'll have the final. So we're almost done with this class. I always finish up my lectures though, and basically whatever class that I do with child abuse, because I think it's really, really, really important. It's one of the most important functions, I think, of somebody who works in child development / human development. Myself as like a former preschool teacher, then director, and now an interventionist, I think it's really important professionally that I know this and that I pass on the things that I've learned. And then I think also for people that are going to professionally go into this, they need to know about this. You will always do, if you are a mandated reporter, you will always do additional trainings on top of that. So like right now, if you're a child care provider, there's a really intense in-depth online training if you are like a preschool teacher or something like that the state has done, because you're a mandated reporter. They want all people who work with children to understand this and to sign off that they understand. So most likely you will get more information, but I don't think it ever hurts to have this brought up. So when I was a director, every year we had mandatory child abuse training. It was when you started employment with me, and then every year as well that you're mandated reporter, what are types of child abuse, what are signs and symptoms of child abuse, a little bit on reporting child abuse, and then what happens after the report is made. So this is kind of generally what I always talk about. I also think that maybe if you are going to be a mandated reporter, like maybe you're going to go work in hospice or something like that. You're really not going to work with children after this. You know, you're in human development or education. You're going to go on to something else. So you're not a mandated reporter. I think as a member of the community, knowing that you can report child abuse at any time, I think is really important. I think that we as a society are better that when we see something, we say something. When we see something, we say something. So if we see somebody in need of specifically like vulnerable positions, like old people, people with disabilities, and then children, that we get involved to the best of our ability, because they're really maybe not consenting adults. Like they cannot consent, or they cannot agree to the behavior that they're receiving. They're not a willing participant in it. So we need to step up, and we need to make sure that these children are in situations where they are loved and supported the way that they should. All right, so I really believe that it's our moral imperative as a society. That's like one of the most important things, is that we protect the most vulnerable members of our society. So as a mandated reporter, as a community member, we're going to protect children by reporting to Child Protective Services, or CPS, or Child Welfare Services, CWS. So types of child abuse. So there's about 900,000 cases of reported or substantiated abuse cases in the United States. There's probably a lot more that is not called in, that is not reported, or that is not substantiated. The biggest is neglect, by far 66%. Then we have physical abuse as well as one after that. Then sexually abused, which is 10%, and then emotionally mistreated, which is like emotional abuse, is 7%. Emotional mistreatment probably happens at a much larger rate, but it is very difficult to kind of substantiate or to prosecute. What to look for when you're assessing child abuse and physical abuse. So unexplained injury, impossible explanation of the injury, different stories of an injury, a delay in seeking medical treatment, and then it's really important to interview parents and caretakers separately, and interview the child separately. So years ago in the 80s, I was with my parents. We were having like a barbecue, and we had a deck with like a set of stairs, so stairs that kind of go down, like back and forth go down. And my sister was, so this would have been like 1986. She was like she's like 8 or 9 months, and she's in one of those walkie things. You stick the baby in and they walk around. They can't walk yet, but it's like one of those round child walker things that they can like zoom around you, but they can't walk yet. So barbecue, having fun, everybody's out, tons of kids. Everybody's kind of watching the baby, but nobody's really like supervising the baby. So she like takes a header down the stairs. She falls like the entire staircase down into our yard. Face is like busted, like red, bust lip, black eye, big scratch. We live 2 minutes from the hospital, so my parents rush her up there, and like they saw a nurse, then they saw a pediatric nurse, then they had the ER doc come in, then they had like this like started with triage. They saw like 5 people each time. they said, what happened? Like very, very seriously. And my mom was getting really upset. She was like, I already told you the baby was in the walker and she fell down the stairs. And then now looking back, I remember how mad, but it's really important that they were talking to my parents together and then separately to see like, okay, when did this happen? Okay, so she has a delayed medical treatment. Did the story ever change? You know, it never changed. Is this possible that a child could fall in a walker downstairs and this would happen? Yes. Is it an unexplained injury? No. So in their mind, I could see them as mandated reporters walking through the steps medically to make sure this didn't sound like a child abuse situation. It would be more if the parent came in and said, oh, he ran into a door, or what door? And somebody says bathroom and somebody says kitchen. Or you start with the bathroom and then you say garage. You know, the things are changing. Or running into a doorknob doesn't cause like a huge bruise on your butt. You know, things like that. So unexplained injuries. So when I've called before with physical abuse, I've called a few times, but for one of the children, so we were after school program, so we had to pick him up, and he's wearing like this gigantic hoodie, like our like zip up fleece thing, so his neck is completely covered, and it's like 80 degrees. And the teacher's like, there's something going on. I don't know what it is. I haven't gotten a chance to talk to him. It's been a really busy day, but you guys need to talk to him. So we kind of threw this situation on us. So we get him back, and it's still really hot, but we let him have snack. The staff has notified me immediately when they come in. I come down, I have snack with them, and then I'm like, hey, so-and-so, come up to the office with me and have a little chat. And I bring him in, and I said, you know what? I'm just going to look at your neck and your shoulders, and I just want to look at it really fast. And I zipped it, and I looked at it, and he had bruises from a belt, and he admitted in that moment that his mom had been here the night before. So I said, thank you so much for letting me know. I'm going to have you kind of sit up here, and I'm going to get you some awesome coloring books, and I'm going to get you more snack, and you're just going to hang out here for a couple hours. And then at that point, I went and I made a full report. I was on Camp Pendleton, so they have their own kind of separate services as well. So military police came in and things like that. But I called Child Protective Services. They triaged it and they said this is an immediate call. So they had somebody come out. I think it was within 2 hours. They took the child. We never saw him again. I heard through the military grapevine that grandma had come out and she now had like kinship custody care of him as a grandmother, as a family member. She was becoming a foster parent for him. The military police stayed when she came to pick up. They told her why, and we never saw her again as well. So that's an example of physical abuse. Like I literally saw black marks, the edge of a belt and the belt buckle make very specific bruises and marks for the child, and I saw that. At that point, I didn't need to talk to the child. He volunteered it spontaneously to me. I think he loved his mom, and after that he didn't want to get her in trouble, and he mentioned that quite a few times. But I think in that moment he was afraid to go back, and I think that this had been going on, and he had been able to hide it really well from us. We knew that there were some behavioral things going on, but nothing that would have indicated to this extent that this kind of abuse is going on. So that's an example of what we look for in child abuse, and physical abuse. Emotional abuse is really, really difficult. Public shaming, belittling, you're stupid, you're ugly, why can't you do anything right? God damn it, why are you like this? You know, things like that. At any point in time, a parent has probably said something, God, stop it, to I hate when you do that, you know, something like that. Parents say that. We don't like that we say that, but we say things that sometimes, you know, we get upset in the heat of the moment, or a sibling has a sibling, or, you know, something happens, and we say things that we don't mean. Or we say things more harshly than we want to. So when does the harshness become emotional abuse? When it's chronic, when you say something so outrageous and so terrible, you know, so it's really like a spectrum, but it's a very subjective, variable spectrum where one person could think that that was teasing and good fun, where another person could think that that's really harsh teasing. But if it's chronic, if it's ongoing, if it's meant to belittle or make the child feel small and insignificant and stupid and like they'll never amount to anything. If that's the goal of the words that you're using against your child, then it's emotional. So just getting upset in the moment and saying, God, I wish you wouldn't do that, or something like that is not the same as chronically telling somebody and with the intent of telling somebody to make them feel bad about themselves. So this can include teasing, name calling, blame shifting, scapegoating, where one child is kind of picked out of a few children, constant sarcasm, really hostile looks, snide remarks, withholding affection or withholding emotional support because you want them to feel bad or buck up or something like that. Super angry attacks on the child and the child's character, what the child looks like, just constantly dismissing their own ideas and opinions. The really hard thing is that you could never see this. Like a parent could have on a perfect demeanor out in public, or you could just think that they're kind of a rude person, but you wouldn't ever know that it was chronic emotion. Although it can underlie physical abuse, sexual abuse, bullying, domestic violence, things like that. So a lot of times somebody who's engaging in domestic violence or is engaging in physical abuse started with emotional abuse, that started with that cycle of abuse where you're yelling and screaming, you're building towards the tension, then you escalate and you hit, and then you go back to apologizing and blame shifting and things like that. So typically it comes with the other ones, but on its own, if the parent is really savvy or the parent isn't hitting and they're only engaging in emotional abuse, it can be really, really difficult to kind of see this. If you are an educator, you might want, and you have concerns about emotional abuse, the best thing to do is to keep a written log of the things that the child is reporting that they're saying to you. And this is assuming that the child has verbal skills. So like even in physical, any of these abuse, if the child really can't talk, it makes it a lot harder. And that's why our infants and toddlers can be so vulnerable to this, is that they can't tell us what's going on. They have to tell us with their behavior or if we see the marks on their body. So if you are an educator or a professional or something like this that has ongoing contact with the child and you think that just emotional abuse is happening or just neglect is happening, the best thing to do is keep a written log. On this date, the child said that the parents did this. On this date, the child came in crying because this happened. On this date, well, so kind of a written log to see how chronic and ongoing is this, and then talking with somebody above you, a superior, a person in management, about your concerns about emotional abuse, and then what should the next steps be. All right, so sexual abuse is horrific. All abuse is horrific, but I think sexual abuse touches on this taboo place that we have in all societies where you don't, sexually abuse children and young children. Once again, this can be quite hidden. It's not something, unless you catch a person in the act or the child tells you about it, it's not something that you can necessarily see, or it might come with physical abuse. But there are some emotional things that we might be aware of. So there's a change in sleeping pattern, like nightmares, night terrors, screaming, wetting the bed, like a 9, 10-year-old, 13-year-old wetting the bed is this pretty clear sign that something's going on in that child's life. It might not be sexual abuse, but there's something difficult in this child's life, and we need to figure out what the root cause is. Drastic changes in eating patterns, either wanting to get really, really big, like overeat, food is pleasure, food is comfort, eating to make yourself feel better and also to make yourself more unwanted. Like if you change your personal appearance, so if you either get really, really skinny or really, really big, maybe this person won't want to take advantage of you anymore like this. Sudden mood swings, and so the drastic changes means kind of overeating to the point of like binging on food, or eating nothing. So it's kind of the anorexia or the binging type things would be an example in children that something's going on. Sudden mood swings, like from the highest highs to the lowest lows, or coming into school feeling really sad, and then doing better at school because you're away from your abuser. Dropping hints about the abuse through playing. So in the dramatic play area, if you're engaging in behaviors that you should know about, I reported once on a 3-year-old who knew sexual acts more than he should have. Like very explicit things he knew about, and he was having dolls to do them. And that was like a 100% a red flag for us. Writing about things like explicit sex acts, drawing them, speaking about them, and knowing more than you would expect a 5-year-old to know, a 9-year-old, a 13-year-old, something like that. And that's where knowing about child development comes into play. 13-year-olds are going to say, you know, words, penis and vagina and things like that. And that's okay. It's kind of them exploring their world of sexuality. A 5-year-old might know those words, but and saying them might be something of a thrill, but knowing, like, drawing pictures of them and things like that would be a little bit of like, wait, why would a 5-year-old kind of know that? So knowing about development, talking about people with the things that people are saying, but typically in instances with sexual abuse, when you see the hints about abuse, when they're talking about things they shouldn't know about, it's an immediate red flag. Like, that human part of you kicks into gear and you're like, this is not okay. A fear of a certain person or a place, either the place where they are abused or the person who is abusing them, especially if it's incest, like it's a cousin, like if every third week they go to their grandma's house and now they hate to go. What's going on? Adult knowledge of sexual behaviors I've talked about, because that talks about the hints and abuse, like words, drawings, things like that. Receiving money, gifts, or toys for no reason, like all of a sudden if they have an expensive iPad or fancy clothes, you know, things like that, and they didn't get from their parents. Why is your neighbor giving that to you? Like, why is your second cousin once removed doing that? You know, something like that. Is repulsed by himself or her body, constantly covering up, huge bulky clothes, doesn't want to touch their body, like cutting themselves as they're getting older, things like that. Talks about an older friend or refuses to share secrets, or talks about things about this one specific person. A lot of times you'll hear it from hearsay. The child won't want to tell adults about it, but they might brag about it. Not brag, but talk to their peers about it. And they seem to be bragging about it, but what they're really doing is like kind of saying, this is weird that this person is doing this to me. Is this happening to you? And so a lot of times sexual abuse we'll hear about secondhand. A child will say, my friend said this. And then you'll have to go talk to that child and say, you know, you were talking about specific sex act. How do you know about that? And we'll talk more about like the actual reporting of it as well. So sexual abuse, rape, incest, sodomy, lewd or lascivious acts upon a child, or child molestation. I want to talk about sexual exploitation because that's, so rape, incest, sodomy, we kind of know what those words mean. Lewd or lascivious acts, there's two categories. There's above 14 and there's under 14. Under 14 is taken much more serious, but that's performing sex acts on a child or having a child watch them, participate in them, have their pictures taken of them while they're doing them, anything like that. So I want to talk about sexual exploitation. This has become more of an issue because we are now an online society. There have been big changes in politics. Just like 2 weeks ago, there was an FBI raid about this because the FBI or the Justice Department, or both, I think both, is now starting to crack down on sex trafficking and online porn. Sex trafficking, online child porn, and prostitution online. These areas have some overlap, but they're quite different as well. So I'm talking about sexual exploitation of children, which we all know is a hard stop and a hard no, and there's no kind of prostitution of adults, you know, a person choosing to be a prostitute or a sex worker. We could have a healthy debate about that in like a politics class or something like that. Sexual exploitation of children, sexual exploitation of anybody is a hard stop and a hard no. But what it is depicting a minor engaged in obscene acts, preparing, selling, or distributing obscene matter that depicts minors, employing a minor to perform obscene acts, encouraging a child to engage in or insisting others, prostitution, sexual conduct, slides, drawings, printings. Most of this is all online now. And then duplicating, printing, exchanging, and things like that. I do bring it up because we are on the border region. As wonderful and as diverse as the border is, we see more of this. We see a lot more sex trafficking. If you go to Tijuana, a lot of the sex workers down there are being sexually exploited. They're under the age of 18, sometimes under the age of 16 or 14. They're being exchanged into hands across the border, coming up even to the North County with migrant workers and things like that. They're typically held in captivity and are plied with drugs in order to keep them subservient. It's a horrible thing that's going on. So sex trafficking is once again a hard no as well. So I want to talk about this because I think it's going to be rare that any of us are going to work in this unless you go into the FBI or the Justice Department or you're become a cop or something like that. Then you will see sexual abuse on a professional standpoint. I've only reported sexual abuse once, and I've been working in this field for 18 years. So it's quite rare that we actually come across this. So I just want to bring up society-wise, if we see something, we have to say something. There was a story a couple of months ago about a family in Portland who, like, somebody was texting right next to them in an airplane. And it was like huge text with like huge pictures because the person was like 60 or 70, and they were texting that they were going to be flying into Portland or from Portland, something like that. And they were arranging with the woman to meet that woman's child or the woman had a child for this person, and they were going to engage in sexual exploitation of this child. The person next to them saw this happen on the big screen on their Galaxy or whatever, and a huge print, got up, went to see a stewardess. The stewardess called the marshals, and the marshals met him at the gate and like prevented this huge tragedy. They found the child with the woman in this remote location. They like stopped this whole thing from happening. So if you, in any situation in any part of the country, and I'm not, just focusing exclusively on TJ, but we live right across the border from it, but anywhere that we are seeing children that may be in an exploitation thing, or you see something online, you have a duty to report it. So sex trafficking, like I talked about, it's engaging in all of these types of things as well, but there are some more legal issues about like transporting people and stuff like that. Okay, so neglect. All right, so signs of neglect. Or I'm going to go through the definition of neglect. So neglect is the inability of the parent or guardian to supervise or protect the child. So we have kind of willful neglect or intentional neglect. So the parent has the ability to take care of their child. They have the ability to provide clothes, shelter, supervision for their child, and they choose not to. And this also includes medical treatment as well. Then we have passive, in which you are not incapable. So you don't have the ability, either through poverty or through typically substance abuse or low cognitive function yourself. You cannot provide for the child's shelter, clothing, keeping them clean, taking them to the doctor, all of those things that you should do for a parent, you don't have the ability to do yourself. So typically it's the guardian's mental illness, developmental disability if they have low cognitive function themselves, or if they have substance abuse issues. So from those two types of things is, one, you're choosing not to do it for whatever reason, possibly because it's emotional neglect. You don't like this child, you hate this child, you belittle them all the time, and you don't want to take care of them either. Then there's passive. In most cases, I think it's like 87% are passive cases. So the parent is engaged in something, they're either mentally ill or they're engaging in substance abuse, or they have a low cognitive function and they cannot take care of their child. What would be the signs of neglect in this case? So if you are an educator or professional and you see the child on a semi-frequent basis, they're absent a lot. They just don't come to class anymore. They beg or steal food or money. So like at break time or during class, they'll go to where the cubbies are and they'll try to take food from other kids' backpacks and things like that. They need medical care and they're not receiving it. So if they need glasses, the glasses are broken or they don't have them anymore. If they have eczema, the prescription creams are not provided for them. So they're constantly itchy and flaky and red and uncomfortable. They're constantly dirty and they have severe body odor. They lack sufficient clothing for the weather. Whether it's 40 degrees outside and the child has, a cotton long sleeve shirt and no winter coat, and it's a chronic issue. Not Johnny forgot his coat today. Johnny doesn't have a coat. And same with dirty. Like I saw a little boy jump out of the car in the drop-off line for school the other day. Johnny's totally clean, but Johnny's wearing dirty polo shirt because they have a dress code at my daughter's school. It was probably, mom's struggling that week and the clothes didn't get through the laundry, or, Johnny chose to wear that, something like that. He didn't look completely dirty. He just looked like he put on a dirty shirt that morning. So it's kind of like the chronic issues. The child is chronically dirty. They always smell. They're always hungry. They are, at the older they get, the more they abuse alcohol and drugs. Nobody's watching them for whatever reason, either active or passive. They'll tell you that nobody's home. Like, why didn't you do your homework? Oh, my mom's not home. Where is she? I don't know. Or she's at work. What time does she get home? Midnight. Something like that. And the child's 7 or 8 and shouldn't be supervising themselves. That would be examples of it. This is the question I get asked the most, is spanking. Is spanking legal? Can I spank? I like to start it off with rethinking how we think about positive guidance and support of children. I have spanked my children. I don't like that I spanked my child. Ran away from me in the Target parking lot, like ran away from me, not like took off seriously in danger, cars around, middle of the day, 2-year-old takes off, and I spanked her on her butt, and I yelled and told her how unsafe that was, and that's really scary, and she shouldn't do that, and she's made herself unsafe, and all this type of stuff. So in that moment, I thought, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be the parent who spanks. I want her to know that it's deeply unsafe and she should not ever run away from me in a parking lot again. That could hurt her body. You're very small. The cars are very big. What if they don't see you? You could be hurt. You'll have to go to the doctor. You'll have to have medicines and shots and things like that. So explaining to her why her behavior wasn't okay. And then also being able to regulate my stress level. Like in that moment, like adrenaline pumping, hearing it in my ears, like knowing that my child is so unsafe, and I think that I overreacted in the moment, and I needed to be able to regulate myself. And then situations now, as they're getting older, and they're rolling their eyes, and they're being more and more like middle childhood, like kind of pushing boundaries and stuff like that. Regulating my stress level with that as well. Like, this is developmentally appropriate. That doesn't mean that I want them to act like that, but that's how they act. How can I help them be grateful, nice children? How can I support them in that instead of yelling or instead of spanking, stuff like that? So we all probably were spanked. I was, you might have been, you might spank now. Spanking is not something that we have cultural consensus on. It really varies about where we are, what group we are, what race we are, ethnicity, language you speak, all that type of thing. And one of the great things about the melting pot of America is we have all of these diverse perspectives on child rearing. In like Scandinavian countries like Sweden and Finland, it's 100% illegal to spank your child or do any kind of corporal punishment with them. 100%. They don't have a lot of cultural diversity. They're, for the most part, Scandinavian. There are some immigrants, but that's what they've decided. And so in like world congresses, like with the UN, where they're talking about children, the rights of children and protecting children and stuff like that, a lot of times African and Asian countries will have a lot of mismatch with these Scandinavian countries, and that they have real different ideas about raising children. So we have those same things in the United States, which I think is fantastic. But when it comes to corporal punishment, I would kind of like to reframe it away from physically striking children, because I don't think that actually teaches them anything at the moment. I think positive guidance or consequences, boundaries are much more important. But I do want to talk about what the actual law is. So corporal punishment is allowed by law as a disciplinary action in the state. Parents can face legal trouble, so CPS can be involved, or if it's custody battle, other custody can be taken away if they cross a line, become too forceful in administering the punishment for their children. The law states that it becomes child abuse, so it stops being spanking and corporal punishment and becomes abuse when anyone willfully inflicts upon a child any cruel or inhuman corporal punishment or an injury resulting in a traumatic condition. So it's very vague. You'll hear a lot of old wives' tales or urban legends about, like, you can hit them 5 times but not 7, or you can hit them with a bag of oranges or through as long as you don't leave a bruise or a mark, then it's fine. This is, as far as I can tell, the law concerning this, which is quite vague. So if you cause an injury to your child while spanking them, a bruise, a welt, a broken skin, or lacerations, you can be charged with and prosecuted for child abuse. So my best bet is, if you are spanking, to engage in a process of reflection about yourself as a parent and possibly get parenting classes. I've done them myself when my children had speech delays. I did the first 5 class where I learned how to speak to children with my children, not children. I knew how to talk with children who had speech delays. I didn't know how to talk to my children because everything I know here doesn't necessarily apply to my own kids. So I need to learn as a parent and not as a parent educator. I need to learn myself how to work with my own children. And it's been a process my whole entire mothering career is, how to work with these specific 3 little personalities that I've been gifted with and how I can kind of raise them to the best of my ability. So I definitely sympathize, and I've been there with people, and I just want us to kind of think beyond that. So reporting child abuse. So when I was first doing this lecture months and months, years ago, I guess, for students, my sister-in-law was watching my kids so that I could do this one day. She's a stay-at-home mom. Her kids were now in school, and so sometimes she helps me out, which is fantastic with babysitting. And I said, oh, I'm going to go write about child abuse. Awesome. Like, I was being sarcastic. Like, nobody wants to write a lecture about child abuse. Nobody wants to actually lecture about it, but it's something that we need to do in order to protect children. So we kind of laughed about it. Then like an hour later, I'm finishing up, and she comes and she sits down and she's like, so, and I'm like, you want to talk about child abuse, don't you? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, one of your kids, she has 3 of her own. I'm like, one of your kids' friends you think is being abused? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, so what if I was talking to a lay person, like my sister-in-law, completely not involved in anything education related at all? She's a saleswoman. She used to be a saleswoman. Now she's a stay-at-home mom. What would I tell somebody like that's not involved in our field? How do you report child abuse? So what I would do is I always tell people is call 411. Like, that's the number, that's like the county number that you get. Like, you don't know what bus line to take. You can also say, hi, I'm concerned about a child. I think they're being abused. Can you direct me to the right department? And they will get you in touch with Child Protective Services, and they will walk you through the steps. So whenever you call either this number or you call 411, you go to CPS and you go to a trained professional who has a master's degree in this, and they take you through the steps. So you need to have some information if you are going to do this. Like, you can't just be like, that cat's acting weird. Like, you need to have seen the bruise. The child needs to have told you something. You need to see behavior from a toddler that's indicative of physical abuse or emotional abuse or sexual abuse, something like that when you're called. So the last time I called was a neglect case for a child whose parent seemed to have not been sober anymore. They were sober for many years, and they relapsed back into substance abuse, and it was a passive neglect case. They couldn't, because of their addiction, provide for the child anymore. There were quite a few children in the home, so I had to step by step talk through this child 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, age, where they live, who their parents are. You need a certain amount of information when you're going to do it. And then I talked about why, like, the children didn't have appropriate food in the house. There wasn't food over like a 2-week period. There wasn't food enough to feed them in the house, or the food was dirty, or it was rotting, things like that. Clothes smelled moldy, like they had been sitting in the washing machine for weeks, or maybe had never been dried in the first place, like the oldest child had been trying to do it themselves. So I had a lot of reasons why I suspect neglect, and I told the person. They kind of triaged it, and they said, yes, this is a child abuse situation, and so we are going to look into it. So the best thing, though, is to have the information and to just leave it at that. So don't try to investigate on your own, because you could inadvertently make it worse, or you could put thoughts into a child's head. So leave that to the professionals. I have a master's degree, but it is not in child protection. So my friend did this. She actually went to Cal State San Marcos. She started at Palomar Child Development, AA, then she went to Cal State in Human Development, and then she got a master's. I don't remember exact, I think it was in social work. So then from there, she took classes specifically in child protective social services, and then she got additional training once she went to once she went to CPS. So then she started off as like a hotline person, and then she did basically everything. She went into the home, she took children away, she worked with families who were trying to get their kids back. She did everything, and so she has high experience in that. And so she always says that you should have the information, you should have the reason why you think there's child abuse, and you should have basic information about the child, and then you should call and then leave it alone. like trust that CPS is going to take care of it. Don't gossip about it. Don't talk to your neighbors about it. You know, talk to a significant other who can remain, you know, is not going to talk about it either. You might need to get this off your chest. It was probably a difficult thing for you to experience. You might want to talk to somebody about it, but you don't want to gossip about it. You want to talk about it in the neighborhood, or so-and-so happened, or this woman at my church, or in my mom's group, or, you know, something like that. We want to allow the family to deal with this as privately as possible. And you also don't want to talk to the child about it and say, how many times did he hit you? Did he hit you 7 times? Because then the children are susceptible to those type of things. They'll be like, yeah, he hit me 7 times. So you want to allow CPS to interview the child because they have been trained in how to do it. They know the words and the phrases to use that don't put things into the child's head. So what happens when you report? A lot of times people feel really anxious about reporting because sometimes the family will know that it's us, and sometimes they won't. But if you report in good faith, so you did it because you knew that something was happening. So you felt in your heart and you had this thought or this gut level thing that a child was being abused. As long as you did it in good faith and you didn't want to hurt somebody else, then you are protected by the law. They can't go after you. They can't sue you, anything like that. So you're immune from civil and criminal liability if you report child abuse and neglect in good faith. So you weren't trying to hurt somebody that wasn't a custody case and you're trying to get back at the dad by saying he abuses. There, you're on your own. That's not good faith. So you cannot be retaliated with, you can't be hurt, you can't be prosecuted, and you will be protected by the courts if you did it in good faith. I do want to talk about education in that parents can put 2 and 2 together and know that it's you. That cannot stop you. I had a situation where just a couple years ago where the parent knew that it was me and I just took myself out of the situation. It's a little bit easier in that I'm a home visitor. I just never went back to that home. Like once CPS had visited and the things that we were telling, they knew that it was going to be me or the physical therapist or the occupational therapist who comes into the home. And they kind of put 2 and 2 together and knew that it was the early interventionist. Soon, within the year, the PT and the OT had reported as well. But I was the first one to do it. The family knew. She called the office where I work very upset. And my director said, I'm just not going to send Jolie anymore. I'm going to send somebody else. She said, no, I don't want anything to do with you. I'm switching groups. And that's fine. I know in education systems, it can be a little bit harder if you're a preschool teacher or a first grade teacher, or kindergarten or 7th grade teacher or a social worker or something like that. It can seem like I don't want to do this because I don't want the family to be mad at me or to yell at me or to scream at me. It doesn't matter. You have to do it anyway. You have to think that you have to protect this child who's in a situation that they can do nothing about. And so somebody being upset with you is ultimately not the goal. You know, that we don't want that to happen, but that might be collateral damage, let's say. That's also when you involve your boss, your management, supervisors, superiors, anything like that, and tell them that you're in this uncomfortable situation and how can they help you work with the family. So that's how we report, how we remain confidential. And if we do it in good faith, we will be protected. And then if they know that it's us, that's the risk that we're going to have to take, but other people should help us in keeping ourselves safe. So I talked about this last week, but what happens after you report? I just want to talk about it again. So you call, you know basic information, you know where the child lives, or you know their name or their parent's name or a phone number or something like that. They're doing an initial screening while you're talking. So if you're saying, I was at Walmart and a mom hit her kid, and then you say, okay, what's the child's name? I don't know. Do you have the license plate? No. Do you have the family's name? No. Do you have their phone number? No. Like, if you don't have the basic level where they can get in touch with them, there's nothing that they can do. They're going to say, well, you know, if you see them again at Walmart, get some more information. Or you'll say, my friend, or, you know, you're a kindergarten teacher and the child reports that he got spanked because, you know, he took his iPad from his sister and then he whacked his cousin and then he threw a dinner plate and his dad popped him on the butt. They'll probably say that that was corporal punishment. The child got spanked for some bad behavior. You know, maybe as a professional, you want to offer them some parenting classes or some resources for positive guidance, something like that. But they might do an initial screening, but it's not child abuse. From the screening, let's say that you're talking about neglect. It's active neglect. The parent is choosing not to provide this for an infant. They're choosing not to give them the right formula. The child's constantly dirty. The parents have the ability to. Okay, so then they're going to say yes. There is going to be an investigation required. From there, they're going to do emergency response. So within whatever is mandated by CPS that day, the next day, within 48 hours, something like that, they're going to come out and they're going to talk with the family. They're going to interview the family. They're going to look at the child. They're just basically going to see if maltreatment is substantiated. If it's not, if the child's not being neglected, then the case will be closed. If they are, from that point, are we going to remove the child or not? If not, then we're going to give them services. We're going to make sure that they're in a safe environment. If there was domestic violence, and that's why they couldn't take care of the infant, getting them into a shelter, giving them the resources to do that, giving them money if they couldn't feed the child, things like that. Let's say the family has all this. There's no point for the neglect. They have formula. They have washing machines. There's no violence in the home. There's no reason for this neglect. Yes. What's going to happen? The child's placed in foster care, either with a parent, a grandparent, or a family member, or in just basic foster care with a stranger that they don't know, and then they're going to work on family reunification services. From there, they basically have like 18 months. So at that point, in 18 months, and it never really works in 18 months, but that's the goal of the court system, is that within a year to 18 months, the parent has either completed parenting classes, anger management classes, safety class, like all the things that the court's telling them to do, or sobriety classes, addiction, whatever it is, a program, whatever they need to do, that they've done it, they've had supervised visits, they've had unsupervised visits, they've had nighttime unsupervised visits. Everybody is saying that this family can take care of this child now, then the child returns home. If they can't do that, if they haven't done any parenting classes, they haven't reached out to the child, they haven't done supervised or unsupervised visits, then at that point, then the courts are going to move either to go towards adoption or guardianship or long-term foster care, depending on the child, the age of the situation. So we're hoping that in these situations, we offer services to the family as a unit still. So you are overwhelmed, you have violence in your home, you have addiction, how can we provide wraparound services so that the child can stay in the home and not be removed traumatically, and you will become a better parent, better able to meet the needs of your child. If not, then you go to foster care and you try to earn that back. So you try to reunify it, you have to do steps, it's very prescribed by the courts, people watch you, it's supervised, things like that. If those don't happen, then the next steps will be guardianship. So that's kind of what happens when you call. I know for a lot of people it can seem like behind the scenes things if you're not familiar with it, and that's why I kind of want to bring this. And I like to talk about even my 100 classes, people that are doing this as a general education, like at Palomar, I like to talk about there's a system behind it. It's not perfect. Sometimes children fall through the cracks, but for the most part, our kids are being taken care of. Okay, so other issues. It's important to report and remain confidential. Like I said, don't investigate. If you have a suspicion, just report it. And there's a fantastic video online. It's on YouTube. It's called Shadows to Light. It's about the California Child Protective Service system, and it's about educators. So they show you pictures. They go specifically through the signs and symptoms of abuse, and they always say it's your gut level decision. So if you feel that this child is being abused and you have some basic information about the child, just call and then let the trained officials do their job. So if you want to know more, please watch Shadows to Light. You can just go to YouTube and literally link on that. It's 20 minutes. It's a fantastic video, and it'll give you more information about all of this. But as members of society, we really need to report child abuse to Child Protective Services or Child Welfare Services. And then when we have a suspicion of child abuse, we have to report it. We have to protect the most vulnerable members of our society as a whole. And then as us who are our professionals, our future professionals in this field, we are going to be mandated reporters who must do this. Then my last one is the Chadwick Center in San Diego. They are a child abuse prevention program, and they have fantastic services. So if you are working in human development or child development right now, and you're working in like a classroom situation, you're an aide or a teacher, and if you have more questions about this, they have a lot of PowerPoints and handouts and things like that. And then the information on, I spelled corporal wrong, but corporal punishment, I got this from the law office of David Stone here in California, who deals with a lot of custody issues and child abuse issues as well. And so that's where I got this law information. Because I'm not a lawyer, My full disclaimer, not a lawyer. I know a lot about child abuse, but I don't know the legal side. So I went to his website in order to learn more. All right. Thanks so much, and I will see you guys online.